Investing your money in environmental, social, and governance funds, otherwise known as ESG funds, is a bad idea and is costing you a lot of money. The idea is that you can do good and make money at the same time. Unfortunately, that is not true. ESG funds tend to underperform the market and they don't do that much good anyway. So the question is, why ESG funds underperform the market? Well, it makes sense to me if a fund manager focuses attention on investing in companies with a high ESG score and not necessarily on companies that have a high profitability, then his investments are going to look good from the ESG point of view, but not necessarily from the profitability point of view. And let me give you an example. We all know the company Tesla, right? Well, Tesla, for one reason or another, has a very low ESG score. I think because people don't like Elon Musk, well, whatever the reason. And Tesla has been one of the most profitable companies in the decade. In fact, for the past 5 years, the stock has gone up 1,200%. That's about 240% per year. Meanwhile, another company, Colgate-Palmolive, which we all know, we all buy toothpaste and things like that. Well, that one has a very high ESG score, okay? But the return from this company has been abysmal. In 5 years, they have only returned to investors 25%. Okay, so if a fund manager says, oh, I'm not going to buy Tesla stock because that one has a low ESG rating, and I'm going to load up on this Colgate-Palmolive stock because it has a high ESG rating, well, it is obvious that this ESG fund that he managed is going to underperform regular market returns. It's just going to do much worse because he's leaving out companies that are profitable and putting in companies that, yeah, they make a little bit of money, but hey, they rank high on the ESG scale. It really doesn't make sense. Another reason is that ESG funds have an extra level of bureaucracy and an additional level of expenses. So everyone's opinion of environmental, social, and governance, they vary a little bit. So you need a whole bunch of people arguing about how to measure the environmental impact, the social impact, and the governance impact of each company. And it just takes so many labor hours to come into any kind of agreement. Then after you agree on something, then you have to measure every company to see how they apply to your framework. And of course, that takes time and effort and money. And once you have concluded on, okay, so these are the companies that are ranking this number, and this number, then after all that work, you have to market the work that you have done, the idea that these are companies that are doing good for the planet, they are good socially, they have good governments framework, and then, this marketing, you have to sell this idea to the customers, and this marketing costs money. When you compare that to just simply buying the Standard & Poor's 500 that costs almost nothing, and there is not marketing because the marketing is the dirt cheap prices, then there is no comparison. The Standard & Poor's 500 or other index funds of that nature, they just make so much more sense to invest in than any of the ESG funds. Another reason is that ESG funds seems to be following a political agenda. Oftentimes, companies that hire black transgender women get a higher ranking than companies that hire white straight men. regardless of which one of these hiring practice is more profitable for the shareholder. In the name of diversity and inclusion, overrides qualification for a particular job. I'll give you an example. Not too long ago, we heard about the ex-president of Harvard University, Claudine Gay, who was put in that position mostly because she was black, because she's a woman, and because she was lesbian. So one single person checked 3 boxes on the diversity and inclusion. Well, it so happens that just shortly after she took her job, she demonstrated how unqualified she was for that position, and she was almost forced to resign. It's just that she was not the right person for this high quality, high placing position. And in addition to that, it was discovered that she plagiarized the work of, guess what, white male professors. So yeah, this was a horrible choice and a good example of how focusing on diversity and inclusion could backfire when the real purpose of an institution is to provide the best service as possible. Another big failure, also in the name of diversity and inclusion, is when Bud Light hired transgender Dylan Mulvaney to do some advertisement for Bud Light. Well, guess what? It backfires because it just didn't sit well with the regular clientele of Bud Light. And the Bud Light was boycotted, and they lost between 100 million to 200 million in revenue, and the company market capitalization dropped for about $5 billion. So this is the cost that some companies who want to have a high ESG rating, they have to pay in order to be higher on that list, regardless of everything else. So I would rather focus, or I rather own companies that focus on the well administration of the company and the profitability of the company, and how they can reward me as a shareholder the best, because I invest in companies to get return, and I want to invest in funds that focus on companies that gives me a higher return. Finally, ESG funds have a hard to understand logic, and there is a lot of politics behind how they rate companies and which company gets a higher rating and which one doesn't. One example that I like to mention again is Tesla. Well, it happens that Elon Musk doesn't like to play politics, and his company is one of the worst ranking companies, while Philip Morris, a company that produces tobacco that produces cancer, that kills people, that kills every year over 8 million people, has a higher ranking than Tesla, that produces cars that doesn't create pollution in the environment. Well, why? Because Elon Musk is not willing to play the politics game. Another company that is high ranking is Exxon, the company that digs petroleum out of the ground for us to use as gasoline, that creates all this pollution. Well, Exxon is among the top 10 more environmental friendly companies in the world. How does that make sense? There is a lot of politics around the whole issue, and if it doesn't make sense to you, if it's just absurd, why would you invest your money in ESG fund where your returns are lower and it just doesn't make sense? In conclusion, for anyone who wants to make money and do good, my suggestion is to just buy the regular S&P 500. It costs almost nothing. And then, whatever profit you make, well, give that money to charity, the charity of your choice, or buy only from companies that are aligned with your social values. That would be the best way to make money and to do good at the same time. Thank you for watching.